hit record here. So folks who are joining, we're going to run our show here for maybe about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll bring people up on stage and you can beat up Charlie.
Sounds perfect.
That's why you're here, Charlie.
Yeah.
Okay, ready? Here we go. You want to do a little bit of... geez, what is that Van Halen song?
What are you going to do? Are you about to feeling it?
Van Halen, baby. Really cool. Van Halen. That's how we do, right? Rock and roll and IoT. Hey, everyone. Welcome to IoT Coffee Talk.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So this is our second time on Clubhouse, right? And we're simulcasting on Zoom and Clubhouse. And we will tell you right now, it doesn't friggin' work. So we have our good friend who's in Spain. I think somewhere in where is that?
He's outside.
I'm in Barcelona, actually.
Is that your home? Okay, so he's in Barcelona, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, with the highest hotel prices. If you ever go there during MW, if you ever want to stay in a $10,000 a night hotel, go there during MWC and
boom.
Boom.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and today we have a very, very special guest. We have Charlie Key, CEO of Losant. So, hey, welcome, dude.
Thanks for having me.
I see you on LinkedIn all the time. I'm glad to finally be able to have this opportunity to chat with you with these guys who I know you know very well. So, nice to meet you, man.
Pleasure. Yeah, absolutely. And nice rendition of some Van Halen there.
Yeah. Van Halen's
somebody needs to turn down their iPhone that's sitting in front of them because we're getting feedback. And then we're good. Like I can hear myself.
Really?
Looping back.
Maybe you have to mute. Maybe you have to.
Just turn down the volume on your iPhone, and then we'll be good.
Yeah.
No worries. I love the Avengers. The Avengers behind you. That's awesome. You know.
Yeah.
Has anybody been watching WandaVision by chance?
I haven't yet. It looks to be solid.
It's solid, and it's getting freakier. It's
really
like we just, I don't want to give away anything. It does seem like it's a 1950s, 60s sitcom that's silly. And then at some point, it's going to jump into a whole new, I think we're creating a new kind of branch of the Marvel Cinematic Universe here. And so it's pretty cool, and there's some cool tie-ins. So for those of you who don't know, Wanda, remember what happened to Sokovia? We found her there. She was bad, but then she became an Avenger. Remember when they lifted that city up, and remember Ultron? Nobody.
They turned it into a giant bomb. They lifted a city and turned it into a bomb.
Exactly. Does anybody, I feel like Ultron probably doesn't get a lot of love, does he?
It doesn't get a lot of love. I think it's the least favorite of the Avengers.
I think
folks.
so. But Ultron actually they kind of created Vision in that movie. And so now we have a kind of a silly sitcom that actually is kind of freaky, where Vision and our favorite girl Wanda are married. So anyway, I highly recommend it. It's totally freaky, and it's getting freakier. So
Didn't
I'm all
you bring
in.
this up before? This is like deja vu for me, man. It's like weird.
Well, we put you into a capsule, Leonard, for a while, and now we're bringing you back. And so there's that.
Yeah.
So Charlie, could you maybe give us like the full intro and what you do? Tell us all about your company for the audience who doesn't know about your amazing company.
Yeah. So, I'm bald. I guess that's the first thing to know. It's
vitally important.
It is. There was a few, specks of hair late 2019, and then 2020 happened. So
this is going to lead to edge computing at some point, right?
It is.
At some point.
No, I'm one of the co-founders, CEO over at Losant. We started the company about 5 years ago. Really, our entire vision of trying to build a software platform that makes it as easy as possible for enterprises and large companies to build IoT products and solutions. And so, a lot of where this comes to life is in the industrial space. We work with companies like Ingersoll Rand who are building products on top of the platform to monitor equipment out in the field, provide that data back to their customers, build better products in the future. And so, the software that we've created covers a lot of the processing and application enablement of these applications. And so, a big part of that and a big part of the future of what I think is very important, just not only from a company standpoint, but just from the industry is, processing at the edge, whatever we want to call the edge, depending on the day, time, and person we're talking to. Is vitally important. But not only is it vitally important today, it is becoming more and more important. Where we've got multiple edges now. Everything from the physical device to the facility to the cellular network or a private network or whatever it is. So there's a lot of edge pieces that I think are very important in what we're trying to accomplish as an industry is, we want to try to lower the barrier. We want to try to lower the cost. We want to try to make it easier for these companies to build and get products and services out. And so, that was a lot of discussion I kicked over to Rob was, this idea of the edge, both from, the products themselves and then, if we think about the carriers and cellular and also other private networks from a LoRa perspective, or, in the US, we're starting to see CBRS private network type of, pieces come together. And so this is all a very interesting kind of topic in my mind of what we're looking at going forward in this industry.
Wow.
Cool.
And so the Losant platform, it kind of does the kind of cloudy, big stuff, and it also does the edge stuff.
It does. So we have basically, I think about it is we have the edge computing, that we talk about. So for us, what that looks like today is, we have an edge agent that can run on, I call it gateway level hardware. Think of it as a baby Linux box, more or less, deployed via Docker. Actually, we just announced and did a webinar yesterday with Microsoft. It's in the Azure Edge IoT marketplace, whatever that whole thing is. Yeah. So it can be deployed via Azure Edge. That allows to collect data from a bunch of different sources, whether that's over OPC UA or Serial or Modbus, pull that data in, process it. And really what we think about from our standpoint in our platform is, that ease of use, it comes a lot to life through our workflow engine, which is like this drag and drop interface for building complex processing and real-time, data streaming type things. And so you can do that down at this gateway edge, we kind of think about. And so, in my mind, that's an important piece of, being able to ingest a lot of data down there and then, decide what goes up and how often to the cloud and then process it in the cloud and then, spit out a beautiful interface to somebody. So that's a big part of it.
That's awesome. So you're using like Azure IoT Edge with their IoT Hub kind of for its device management capabilities or to push stuff out to the gateway?
So you can, there's a bunch of different ways that we kind of see working at that kind of Azure IoT space. So, one is from a device management with their edge software. So they've got the
deployment or whatever.
And I think they handle some level of firmware and stuff around, all of the pieces kind of in that space. The other piece is like, in the IoT hub. So imagine you already have a set of devices that are communicating through that, Azure IoT hub, but you want to build some additional application on top of it. We have the ability to ingest and connect directly to that kind of data stream in that IoT hub as well. And so there's a bunch of different ways that, that flexibility comes to life for these different companies and how they're architecting their solutions. We see that companies, big and small, are architecting these in all kinds of different ways. And if you're a Microsoft company, if you're in an Azure shop, you're probably already integrated with a number of those services. You're probably already using a number of the pieces there. And so, again, our job is how do we make it easy to use these things in conjunction to getting that end application back out.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
Yeah, but my key takeaway from what you just said was that the IoT edge, whatever that is, I like Rob's definition from a while back. The edge is the default location. It's where the compute needs to happen as close to the source of data or the use of data.
It's where the shit happens, man.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think when we think about edge, a lot of folks think in terms of the applications that run on whatever infrastructure environments are at the edge. But it's also you also have to think about the management of all of the assets that are part of that infrastructure, whether it's endpoints or all of the compute, storage, whatever, and connectivity, because connectivity doesn't happen by itself. And so when you think about the complexity of IoT, what you're really doing is taking like what you're trying to do, or what is becoming, is taking that entire hyperscale stack and then trying to manage that whole infrastructure, as well as all the compute and applications on top of it, out in a non-central location, out at the edge, right, as we define it. So I think it's something that maybe a lot of folks in the IoT community may not appreciate as much, or at least the people who
Leonard,
are outside of it don't appreciate it. What?
Hey, just to make sure we're doing the right thing for our folks in the clubhouse, make sure you take yourself off mute. We're hearing you in the Zoom. All right, now, because
sorry. See, I don't know the friggin' protocol. Sorry, everyone. I said exactly the most awesome thing
that was
ever said in history.
It was
and
awesome.
By the way, if you want to see how
absolutely.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah, there's another person you can't hear. Yeah.
Go to YouTube.
Go to YouTube.
Listen it again.
Hey, also, just really importantly, just in honor of the fact that Charlie's got all the Avengers stuff, I changed my profile pic to Tony Stark. So,
I thought that was just you like 3 years ago, Rob.
Yeah, it is. It was. Yeah. I've had a rough go of it after I had to take out Thanos, but we're good. We're good now. We're good.
Yeah, but so the comment that I was making is that we can't just think of the applications. The key takeaway I got from what Charlie was saying, we have to think about the entire infrastructure, and the challenge that we face going forward is how do you simplify taking basically an entire hyperscale stack plus all the applications that run on top of it, and be able to deploy that, manage that in a simple way at the edge, as Rob defines it, as being the default location, which is a beautiful, simple way of articulating what the edge is versus edge computing, right? Which is just the computing model,
right?
That in a particular context.
But it always, it will be mute for the clubhouse. Maybe you can repeat, Leonard or Rob.
Okay.
But it's also interesting that there is no like a silver bullet on IoT. No, we have said that multiple times. Like there is no like a single solution for each customer. So there is a single solution for each customer, sadly, right, Charlie? So probably there is a customer that wants something that is completely different than the other one, and maybe the use cases are completely the same. So that's maybe the worst, the worst part of the IoT nowadays, right?
Yeah, but you know what? I'll tell you right now, what's making things even worse is that the computing itself, the nature of computing, thanks to AI, is changing significantly. So that complexity
I just got triggered. Did you say AI?
Yeah, I did.
Blockchain.
I did. But you're not going to help me. Oh, come on, dude. Well, no. The nature of the HR from a hardware perspective, it is.
Did you say the nature of HR?
Did I say HR? Oh my God, I'm losing it.
Yeah, well, HR does use blockchain to keep all the employees in line, like their pay scales and all that kind of stuff, and a little AI at review time.
Okay.
Moving right along.
So there's that added complexity that's being introduced at the quote unquote edge. So yeah, it's
I see Mr.
only going to get
Vasquez
worse.
is in the room without a profile pic.
Yeah.
No, I know.
That's horrible. We can't hear you, dude. On
Talk
mute.
to us.
You're on mute, brother.
So double unmute yourself. Boom, boom, you did it.
I just did, and I will get a profile picture that doesn't look like an overly tan Charlie Key at some point today, okay?
Yeah. Or pick an Avenger. You could be a different Avenger. You know? I don't know. Gosh.
Yeah.
So this is exciting stuff. So this edge thing, everybody kind of gets the cloud thing because it's kind of this one-to-many deal. It's kind of easy to wrap your head around. Edge is where things get distributed and more complex, and you have to orchestrate all that stuff. And so, if I'm correct, Losant on the edge, you do it using containers, right?
Yeah.
So you would have a Docker container that's out at the edge gateway or whatever, and you somehow push down business logic rules, whatever, down to that container so it can do its stuff.
Yep. Absolutely. So, you decide what that logic needs to be, and it will get pushed down to that, that agent to process that data. And so that could be something as simple as checking some sensors at the edge at a high frequency, or pulling data from Modbus. So a very super common scenario is you want to read data off of a Modbus controller, at a frequency. So every 3 seconds, I want to read the data off of this Modbus controller that's connected to this system, right? In the industrial world, that's going to be a compressor or a CNC or whatever it happens to be. But this Modbus controller's got a bunch of data. We want to read that every 3 seconds, look at that information, maybe do some aggregation over a couple minutes, or look in real time for some changes or something. And so that's a very common kind of scenario. At the top, you're going to pull that data from the Modbus. You're going to do some checks. Maybe you decide to send it to the cloud. Maybe you don't. The nice thing is, from our standpoint is you're not always expected to have connectivity. And that connectivity is not always expected to work. So as long as our gateway now has some processing to do against, then that can run kind of autonomous of the network itself. It will handle, making sure that it queues everything up. It has all these pieces. So if you have, so you can imagine tossing one of these into a truck, and we're reading a bunch of data about our truck, and then the next time it pulls into the station, it sends all that data up. And so again, a very common area that we're looking at the edge. Less for us in Losant, but more in a general world sense, is automobiles. Automobiles are just rolling edge compute, systems nowadays, right? And they're becoming more and more of that. Every one of them's becoming connected, through Ericsson's system or whatever, and I'm
going to get my paycheck this month. Thank you for that, Charlie. Hey, what mobile operator in the U.S. might that be going over? Does it start with a V?
Verizon is a fantastic way to do all of this connectivity, and so we've covered all of our bases, but those are they're rolling IoT systems now, right? We have, and if you think about the networks inside of them, a lot of it's based off of CAN bus and automobiles, and continues to be, and that runs back to a a gateway, the central computer, and then those are now connected. And so, you take these super complex scenarios and, in my mind, part of it is how do we simplify some of the processing and the pieces, and and to be honest, it's making it more complicated, but it's how do we decentralize those components in order to run on their own and do more interesting stuff. So, but the connectivity piece is such a challenging component in its own right. If it's cellular, is it global? Is it roaming? What happens when we run it out of, we drive it into the middle of West Virginia? All of these things become a big challenge. And then are we going to use multiple connectivities?
Take me home, country roads.
Yeah. Right. So
what happens if you're trying to violate the fact that the Canadian border is closed right now, but you want to go skiing at Whistler, and I bust through the border in is Tesla basically a big edge computer kind of?
Yeah.
Oh, it's absolutely right.
Yeah. There's probably no better example. And of course, every Tesla is delivered with a digital twin of itself too. It's
which is cool.
It is cool. I think, for so many of us in this space, a Tesla is like the ultimate example of, I think, where a lot of people want to go with all kinds of stuff, right? Yeah. So you have a edge agent.
Yep.
So that's software that's alive, it's running, it's doing its thing, and it's running. That agent lives in a container.
Yep.
It's a Docker container, and
Yep.
And that container gets out to the edge, either set up manually or you got to deploy it out there using some kind of something or other.
Yep. Azure Edge, being one, or a Balena, is
Marc Pous just got paid.
Yeah.
Ching, ching, ching.
It's cool that you mentioned all the companies here. So that's super cool.
When are you going to plug Ericsson?
we just keep the paychecks rolling. It's part of the goal. But so you've got to deploy it with these systems. You've got to manage that. And again, like this is in theory, this is about as simple as it gets, right? But it's still not a simple thing. And I wanted to go back to something Marc mentioned earlier, which is, all of these solutions and customers and companies are trying to do it, and maybe even they have the same use case, and maybe 75% of it can be exactly the same, but usually 25% is wildly different based on their environment, based on their specific use case, equipment, the assets, the resources they have. And so that becomes a big challenge in this. And so, the ability to adapt these solutions quickly becomes an important way. It becomes an important part. So a lot of these, as we think about them, these horizontal technology companies, Losant is one, Balena, all of the ones sitting here today fall into this kind of category of these horizontal technology companies. They have to be able to work in these various different complex systems to come up with, buzzword, these digital twins of these, these systems and assets. And so, that's part of the challenge in IoT. And I think it's part of the reason that we continue to kind of see, some level of acceleration, but also this slow roll of trying to figure this stuff out.
So who wants to start?
Sorry, Leonard. Along the lines of challenges. So, so you've mentioned, or someone mentioned, CBRS and private networks. You mentioned how the Losant agent doesn't necessarily need 100% connectivity because of how you do things and you keep things up. But there are still a handful of segments that, in order for them to have a business outcome out of IoT or industrial IoT, they necessitate connectivity. Well, they happen to be in the middle of nowhere, which is, so now we've been here. I mean, private networks are not new, but they seem to be in fashion again.
Right.
And, the C-band, so all this background to ask the question. So from a Losant perspective, surely you folks have customers today or prospects that just have horrible connectivity issues. And because of connectivity and reliability, redundancy, et cetera, they haven't been able to do some things that will be very beneficial. So what's your guys' view and conversations in the context of private networks effectively enabling someone that has a kit, spectrum, and I can be in the middle of nowhere and I can light this thing up? What are you guys talking to them about? Can you walk us through that? Because we get a lot of questions on that. I certainly do. And Rob and his paycheck depends on it.
No. There's a few very, very specific scenarios I'll talk about. We have a customer in the middle of Australia. They are at gold mines throughout Australia. Literally today, they piggyback internal Wi-Fi networks at the sites far enough to get cellular connectivity to backhaul the data back. And so, this is not an optimal situation by any means, and so, as well as they have constraints on how they manage that, what are the actual sensors and everything else they can deploy on these. And so scenarios like that become vitally important to be able to, and I'm going to say cost effectively from both a financial perspective, but also an operational perspective of managing these networks inside of these, we'll call them spaces, whether it's a gold mine. The other one is construction sites is the other one I'll talk about in a second. But the challenge has been, how do we economically not only propose to them that they do this, but also operationally, how do they manage this stuff? Giving somebody a rack of, we'll call it cellular technology to spin up their own network as a construction company or an industrial company is
good luck.
Yeah. We see this with some of the largest companies in the world, and they have the same problems as anybody else. And these companies are having enough difficulty just getting their compressors and engines connected to the internet, let alone trying to spin up a whole new network on their own. And at construction sites, we work with one of the largest construction companies on the East Coast, Clark Construction. They have massive construction sites. They recently built Salesforce Tower. They built the new stadium out in San Francisco. These are massive sites that, again, are set up more or less, we'll call it, Wi-Fi to Cradle Point. I guess that's another shot to, got another paycheck in there. Back out. And that's a really complex setup to manage as a team. And so what I'd like to be able to do is point them to the correct partners and the correct people to help manage and set these up and make it as easy as possible. Because, a site like that, covering it in Wi-Fi, first of all, is a challenge. That is just a literal challenge of spinning up a construction site like, a stadium, where we're gonna now try to cover that every inch while construction is going on, and be able to penetrate new walls going up literally, and all of these other pieces. And so that becomes a large challenge for them. And the IT teams for these companies are, single digit number of people. And so, what we're talking to them about is, how do you think about finding the correct partners to manage, deploy this infrastructure and the network itself, with reducing the amount of operational overhead for these teams to do that? And that's the important part. The financial cost is definitely a piece of it, but the operational overhead, may be even more important for these types of companies, as I think about private networks and the ways for these companies to be able to actually take advantage.
Charlie, I'll stick in. Leonard, that's the second time I interrupt you today.
I know you're like in my groove, dude.
I know how the admins work. Okay, I already got kicked out of some subreddits. Okay, well, that's for another time. Anyway,
Robin Hood.
Bitcoin.
So, Charlie, the financial.
Going back to GameStop.
So, look, all of us here have to make financial sense to deliver an outcome that is profitable, that returns some part of the investment to customers. So sticking to private networks and your example, because if you want to know how much it costs to light up a stadium, you can just Google Verizon Super Bowl and you'll get what the number is. So we know it's a lot, but not every site.
All those fake
stadium.
people were
not
on
every
5G.
site. Not every site is going to have 50,000 of data hungry.
Absolutely.
Right. So So that's a bad reference point. But so my question is, to you is if we stick to a construction site where based on the work that you've done in that industry already, that there's there's operational, financial incentives, safety, like it all aligns to company KPIs.
Yep.
But the gap is where you guys are building this. We are in the middle of I don't know. You know what? Let's stick to the Australian outback. Right? Like no one's dropping circuits here. So your only option is someone's private network.
Yep.
Do you see that then as, as an obstacle, frankly, for you to be able to tell, a private network is going to set you back, X, but you still might get, that only delays your ROI for, an extra year and a half. Are you guys, comfortable having that conversation? Because, in a way, as an application enablement platform, awesome, and you guys are, for some use case that you might need that infrastructure. So, would you guys be proponent of customers just standing a private network up to deliver business outcome? Is that your view?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, it depends on the conversation. I think, we go back to, and I think this is one of the pitfalls we fall into in IoT in general is we shouldn't be doing IoT for IoT's sake, right? Like we should be tying it to business outcomes and we should be understanding what those potential business outcomes. I mean, to be honest, we're modeling this out a lot of the times early on and with the organization and trying to understand. And so I think it's a straightforward conversation if we have an understanding of potential what that ROI is going to be over the long term. And again, I think there is always it's an easier conversation if we're tying it back to dollars coming in, right? Like if the company is literally going to be able to produce more, get more out the door, that's a straightforward conversation. And it's always been easier than, we're going to save you $6 a month over the next 40 years, and it's going to pay for itself easily.
After you
right. So, it's always a conversation of trying to figure out what that business case is and where it can go. Now, sometimes part of that conversation is early with us and they've already figured it out. If it's early, they might have, let's say 60% of the business case understood and looking to understand what the rest of that 40% looks like. And so, a lot of times we're working with our partners and folks to be able to have that conversation and be able to give them the insights that we've seen across our customer base and kind of where that goes. But to be very direct, we're happy to have that conversation about what that private network could potentially be, especially in the use cases that it makes sense, right? Like, again, our view is whatever makes sense for the customer and their goals is what we're going to try to,
De-narrow.
Try to get there. I mean, if hopefully we've already figured out if there's budgetary concerns, pretty early on that we're just never going to cross any of these hurdles, but it makes sense.
Yeah. So
let me get a little bit of discussion here. Sorry.
Yes.
So let me get a bit of discussion with David. So David, about this private network installation. So you meant that about satellite communication, or what did you mean?
No,
because I see the satellite communications as in a very sexy moment where there are like a lot of companies providing these services, and And as I said before, so sometimes the answer for a customer is, it depends. So what do you want to connect? Maybe you need some LoRa sensors that are super cheap, that it's a temperature logger, so you don't need to deploy like a 5G private network there. Just with satellite communication, if you need to send once per day the data, that's enough. So, I mean, probably there is not an only single solution as well on that private network installations. What do you think?
No, shockingly and publicly, I agree with you. Why will you stand up private, new brand, call it whatever. Why would you stand up a piece of infrastructure when you can cheaply and easily solve it with something else? To your point, LoRa sensor, satellite backhaul, and you're done. Yeah. But what I meant with private networks is everything we know from, the mobile network, there's a baseband unit and radios and towers and cabling. Effectively, companies are leveraging that kit for them because of all the spectrum that's been sold. So now, I can pick company X, I can leverage licensed or unlicensed spectrum and build my own network. Now, why would I do that, right? How do I make money out of this? What are my drivers? Is it security? Is it that I have the people that can understand this and manage it? Is it that I have an industry 4.0 vision where I understand that my sensor numbers will continue to grow and I don't want to deal with 100 vendors, so I want to manage that infrastructure? There's tons of reasons to adopt. Most of them are on your side of the pond, Marc. In Germany, the UK, and France, lots of public ones. I think the biggest one in France, it's at the Charles de Gaulle and at the two airports in Paris. And
that Charles de Gaulle.
Sorry, I said it in a little bit.
You said it in Spanish.
French.
Carlos de Gaulle.
Espanol.
But I'll leave you with this. You know what one of the driving use cases for the airport was? To build a private LTE network? Voice. Yeah. Communications between control and the cockpit.
Yeah.
Because they get saturated because of the tourists, probably before the pandemic, right?
Well, the point is, this was a safety driver, and they threw money at this to build a private network instead of using, the oranges and the SFR or SFR or SFR there, all three languages. Oh, so they build their own. So
orange.
You know what? You should become a newscaster.
You should become
a newscaster, David. Yes.
Oh God, I would.
The languages.
He can pronounce his name with the Spanish accent.
I am so sorry that I'm hung up on this deployment thing. So.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay.
I heard some news from our friend. Was it Jason Shepard over at Zedata or whatever, talking about. Was it Project Eve or Eve OS or something like that in Linux, where some kind of open source way to do edge deployments?
Yep.
I know it sounds really geeky and it's really
orchestration.
techy. Yeah. Orchestration's a thing. Everybody's kind of doing orchestration in the cloud with Kubernetes, and then you'll hear people say,
sort of
edge native.
Yeah.
And but it's a thing.
Oh no. Edge native.
Well, think about this. Like back to when I said, cloud is easy. Cloud is one to many. One thing serves many. It's easy to design and wrap your head around. What's hard is edge, scattered all over the place. What if you had to deploy 1 million edge containers all over the place? So let's talk about the MEC thing, where it's running in a cellular network. It's running a base station. It's running in a computer at the bottom of a cell tower, for instance, or in a metro data center that's still not on the open internet yet. It's following the path, and you're still getting low latency, not as low as if you're right on the machine or next to it. In order to do MEC, you've got to have containers deployed to the computers that are a part of that stack at the cell tower or wherever. And then you've got to get your edge agent deployed to that container as well. There's always that chicken and the egg thing. Everybody's excited about MEC. I don't think they get how much more complicated it is to pull off. Though.
It's ridiculous.
It's so like, I need to deploy this code that's going to do this analytics to 1 million cell tower base stations.
Right.
And they've got And so, well, let's tell people, and there's probably a few ways to skin the cat. Let's tell people how we might do that, because that's a hard, because until people figure that out, they're just talking a good game. But to make it real.
Oh, yeah,
How do we make it real with Balena?
Yeah, this is what we do at Balena today. So actually helping companies to, so actually the target of Balena are fleet owners. What does it mean, a fleet owner or fleet manager? Is a company that has a lot of devices. So actually in one click, enable them to deploy the new software or new releases or solving bugs in a really simple way, reducing the friction of what you described 1 minute ago. So this is just what we do. So we help companies to deploy their software in a really easy way using containers. Mm-hmm. And I think this is important. I think you mentioned the containers at the beginning, pointing the Losant agents with Charlie. I think containers is the new paradigm of the IoT for single board computers. And actually, I remember being with firmware developers on Windows 95 some years ago, developing the firmware and going with Bluetooth one by one of the devices, changing the firmware. Now it's really convenient to use tools like containers to develop the applications on single board computers, on IoT, and deploy it in a really easy way with tools that are already on the market. Some of them are open source, like at Balena, and getting tools of the 21st century to the developers of the software in IoT.
Yeah. Cool.
And actually, let me finish. So actually, one of the interesting parts is I'm
gonna let you finish.
If you use containers, actually, you are helping to don't get locked in on one technology, because let's imagine that you use the Losant agent. It's a container. So if you have a way to redeploy this container and just change the endpoint to Losant and change it to another platform, whatever, or the newest version of Losant, it's just that simple. So you just change the container, just test it with one device, and deploy it to the complete fleet, and in just one click. It's that simple. So start using 21st century software development tools.
Stop living in the 90s.
So who wants to start a software-defined radio and middleware company?
I thought we had a few hundred of those.
Oh yeah. Well, they always pop up and they get sold to the big guys. And SDR is just kind of like the what do they call it? The Raspberry Pi of telecom. So I mean, the other thing that you have to think about is
whatever Vasquez is saying.
No. I said I was not going to interrupt the third time. So let me go.
Yeah. I mean, you ruined like two of my jokes, dude. They were so good, and you like stomped all over them. This is horrible, David.
I'm sorry. Carry on.
Missed opportunities. Anyways, so I since everyone's plugging themselves, Next Curve, we did some research with Intel on edge computing. We called the paper 5G Autonomous Edge. You can check it out. Just follow me on LinkedIn, and you'll find a link to the paper. But one of the most important things. No, this is germane to the topic. Stop screwing around, David. I'm trying to speak. It's about network-aware applications. So the applications need to understand location, contextual, be contextually aware of not only the network but location. And there's this whole idea of placement. So there's a great paper that Roy Chua of AvidThink did on network placement, and he and I had a discussion on what we call compute placement. So that's edge compute placement, and it follows along the thinking of exactly what you're mentioning, Rob, about these. How do you orchestrate, manage, and deploy in as close to real time as possible compute workloads across a very large network. So when you look at it from a macro IoT perspective, it's extremely challenging. Like, think smart infrastructure supporting autonomous vehicles, right? I have all these, endpoints running around at, X miles per hour, being able to deploy those specific workloads for a particular client across spatially, across a large area, and connecting massive numbers of endpoints. But then even in smaller environments like a smart factory, you have probably the same challenge, especially when you're looking at industrial grade latencies that you have and reliability that you have to support. Then it gets to another level of insanity. And so that's why, it's hard. It's important as the edge folks start to evolve their thinking around what edge computing is at the edge. You have to start to understand these other concepts. And that's where I think there's still a pretty significant gap. There's a gap between what IT folks are used to in a centralized data center where, basically orchestrating spatially or geographically orchestrating workloads is not something that you really think about. And the comms folks who, are not exactly that savvy at web scale operations and managing hyperscale data centers. So that's that huge disconnect that is going to be resolved at the edge in one way or the other, right? So that's all I got to say. That wasn't funny, but I said it. I finally was able to say it.
Can I wake up now? Oh,
yes.
God.
I know.
Oh my God,
Shoot
the
me.
struggle is real.
Okay.
So we're getting this deployment thing figured out, right? Kind of the chicken and the egg. Someone's got to get a container on a edge thing. So luckily,
one or multiple.
Multiple. So edge, luckily with containers, the container inside has some little tiny version of Linux, probably not Windows.
The base image, yeah.
Yep. And we get those onto any computer that can run Docker and maybe whatever, Balena, all that fun stuff. Is there Kubernetes out on the edge? I guess there is. If it's no. I got
one of the problems of Kubernetes is
un momento, por favor. Okay, go ahead and talk.
So one of the problems of Kubernetes, as far as I know, I don't know, Charlie, if you have other comments here, but is that it doesn't scale.
Right.
So it has a limit. So you cannot have hundreds of thousands of devices with Kubernetes working seamlessly.
Right, and that makes sense. It's the core technology is not meant for that level of we're using hyperscale at the moment. Yeah. So in my mind, I look at Kubernetes as a core infrastructure deployment and management tool, less of I wouldn't look at it as an edge management platform. And that's one of the important distinctions here, though, as we're talking about this deployment scenario of trying to get things across thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of containers. That orchestration of the deployment is just as important as being able to actually place something in there, because a couple things stuck out from Leonard in that conversation was the reliability becomes ultra important, especially as the assets that we're connecting with become vital and crucial to processes. We talk about factories, if we're actually going to try to do some level of control through these mechanisms, the reliability has to be supreme. There's a reason we still use ladder logic inside of controllers that are basically a brick of, chips to get that done, because the reliability is so high. So the reliability has to be there. We can't go bricking things, but think about bricking a MEC infrastructure,
no bueno.
That would not be no good.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of pieces that have to play together well.
Yeah, it's insanity.
I have a question on so Marc and Charlie, I guess any insights on bricking and back to doing things over the air, especially firmware. So any advice for, sometimes as IoT developers, and this is mostly for cellular based. So Marc's friends, he loves the telcos. So you design that you price your product in a way that you will be within the boundaries of the amount of data that you need to receive in order to deliver the service that you sold to your customer. Very few times, it's an afterthought of like, hey, what happens when I have a need to update the firmware on these things? We've seen it where things have been shipped without that capability. Oops. We've seen it where the capability is there, but now the packet to update is orders of magnitude larger than what you agreed with the telco. So from both of you, are there any words of wisdom for the startup community who haven't faced this problem, but that could sink them? What are your thoughts?
I'm sorry that I'm very unfair, but the answer is Valena. So actually, we have a proprietary technology that.
Oh my God!
I'm sorry that I have to talk about the company where I work, but I think that's the right. This describes what you say. So actually, we have a technology that only deploys the deltas. That means that are the different bytes that are different from the container that is running on the device and the container that you want to deploy. So let's imagine that you are only changing. You have a container of 1 gigabyte, and you only want to change like a line of code or 10 lines of code or 1 megabyte. So that's we only deploy the deltas, and that's very significant when you are on cellular network, on cellular connectivity. And as well, actually last week I was speaking with a guy who is doing IoT projects for wildlife and protecting the planet. And he's using Valena with satellite communication that it's very expensive in the middle of the Amazonas. So actually he's like, because we use Valena because of the deltas, because there is no other technology that can do that actually.
Oh, wow.
So actually we are very happy about that technology because solves actually the problem that you described.
Oh, awesome. Okay, hey, I want to introduce really quickly Mirko, hey, dude, sorry for keeping you waiting. So he's been like sitting there raising his hand for forever. Hey, how's it going? Introduce yourself really quickly. I have a client meeting I have to jump to really.
We'll shut down the video. And we'll do Clubhouse after hours and just keep it going.
Okay, you guys do that.
Okay.
All right. Okay,
I promise next week I will have Clubhouse.
Yeah, and apologies to our Clubhouse listeners. We're just trying to figure this crap out. So next week we'll provide more time for you guys to come out.
We got a lot better this week than last week.
Yeah, we really sucked last week, but we do highly encourage you to listen to that recording. It's really funny.
Yeah.
And look, the sunset.
Ah, beautiful.
Oh, look at the sunset on Barcelona. Oh, man.
Yeah, so follow us on www.iotcoffeetalk.
Whoa, wait, is this is it 1995?
I'm trying to get off the call. Okay, IoTCoffeeTalk.com.
HTTP.
Follow us. Yes, and we will be back next week with some topic. I have no idea what it is, but it's going to be friggin' awesome. Charlie, hey, dude, thanks for coming on. It was really fun. Million additional questions coming out of this session. Very inspiring, thought-provoking. So,
absolutely.
Anyways, we're going to shut down this episode. We'll see you next week, right? Anybody want to say anything? Charlie, last words?
Thank you for having me on. And let's keep the conversation going.
All right. And for those of you on Clubhouse, we'll keep going for a little bit longer, for a little bit of IoT Coffee Talk after hours.
And I am out. See you guys.
Bye.